Let there be a signal for the show to start. Welcome to our global audience for this presentation and discussion about global HR and payroll, about building and assuring those capabilities. They are, of course, critical capabilities, and without them, almost no business could function properly. So we're not going to try and cover every aspect of that. We're looking at the emerging changes in what we now know is a very dynamic environment. This is one of a series of webcasts. So for those of you who've been on before, welcome back. For those of you who are new, you're very, very welcome. And from the attendee list, we can see you're from around the world. So thank you for staying up late. To people from Asia Pac, and thank you for getting up early. For those in the Americas, you're all very, very welcome. I'm conscious that not all of you will have English as a mother tongue, so there is a bit more writing than I would normally put on slides so that you can take your time and read those. If you've got any questions, if what we're saying doesn't make sense, or if there's more that you want to know on a topic, please do use the question and answer function, and we will cover those either during the presentation if we get that chance, or at the end. So my name is Ashley Carter. You can probably see that I match my tie and shirt in my picture, which was serendipity and not planned. I'm head of global payroll services, and although that is primarily what it says on the tin, there are, of course, unavoidable aspects of HR in that, and I clearly have a very strong dependence on HR functions in all of my clients. Fiona.
Lovely. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ashley, so much for inviting me to participate today. My name is Fiona Davis. I am a partner here in London, although I do have an Irish accent, so I will purposely speak slowly and clearly for the intention of our global audience. So I am a partner here in London, and I lead our national third-party assurance area. And what that is supporting my many different clients, both international, global, entrepreneurial, in terms of their evolving assurance demands. And it's very much for service providers such as many of you in terms of how you best respond to meeting your clients' needs. For today, I also have an additional hat which I wear, which is my ESG hat, a term which many of you will be familiar with. Well, I hope you are anyway, which is environmental, social and governance. And I sit within our board here in the UK in terms of supporting us as a firm, responding to those evolving needs as a professional services firm. And I also support my clients in the market in terms of responding to those evolving demands. So a couple of angles that I'm bringing to the table today, Ashley, through our discussions.
Great. And I'm really pleased you're joining me. Thank you very much, Fiona.
And Ashley, before you continue, Ashley, you've asked me to remind you, to everyone, we have a Q&A function open within the chat. So as Ashley and I do embark upon our repartee and our wonderful sharing, please do ask questions throughout, and they will pop up and we will try to manage them in the most relevant parts, or at least leave some time at the end where we can make sure we pick them up.
Excellent. Thank you, Fiona. So the title was all about building capability, building HR capability, building payroll capability. Very conscious that is for our clients, and clearly our clients are the most important element for a company like BDO. That is a challenge both in-house, and these days it's quite rare for all payroll services to be provided in-house as well. So a combination of in-house and supply chain, and that and the angle from Fiona is very much about the supply chain and the assurance of that supply chain. And clearly, myself as a payroll provider, I'm a critical part of that to those of you on this call who are clients. And you will, if you're not clients or you have other service providers, you will clearly have expectations of them. So what I thought I would do is just spend a few of the first minutes just setting out how BDO approaches that supply chain and that challenge. Look at some of the themes that we're getting from our client base and other people we meet in the market, and then I shall hand over to you, Fiona. You're very welcome to stop me and interrupt, particularly if I lapse into acronyms, which is a bad habit. So BDO, certainly from my perspective, is all about delivering a consistent, exceptional payroll. We know that's really, really difficult. That's why people come to get expert services, and we know that perfection is not always a possibility, but it's absolutely what we drive for, and what really counts is how you restore perfection when that perfection is not achieved, and that's a theme maybe we'll come back to. But the clients have always asked for more than just payroll. So expat tax, if you've got people traveling in multiple jurisdictions, people who've got personal tax liabilities they may wish to come directly for. And increasingly, and this is the first real theme, I think, of the session, increasingly in the last 3 years since the start of the pandemic, and since the challenge of the war for talent, the Great Resignation, and so on, people are coming to us for more HR advisory and HR support services. That actually is quite of a challenge, Fiona, because the issue with that is that payroll is specific to country to country. HR and HR support is even more specific, both to the client and to the country. And so for a service provider, that is a challenge. And I'm sure that it's also a challenge from your assurance side.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is about teamwork. This is my favorite slide for those of you who've been on my webinars before. I always use it because every person that you see there, every component that you see there is absolutely critical to the perfection that driver expects and that needs. So for my money, the client is the driver, the business that they're trying to drive, and we have to make sure that every single component and every single person is trained, controlled, processes, knows what they're doing, and practice. So for me, it's a perfect analogy of a global payroll operation. BDO's journey has been gusting on for nearly 15 years in global payroll. We took on our first major client in 2010, which is when I joined BDO in our global outsourcing department. We started introducing what were built on SSA, AE18, and ISAE controls in 2015. And we'll come back to precisely what that means. So forgive me for those of you who are not fully familiar with the international standards. Fiona will cover that a little later, but I just wanted to get through this journey so that we can get on to Fiona's interesting technical challenges there. So we introduced a non-audited framework in 2015, and since then we've really wanted to up our own game because we wanted to evidence that we've got the processes, the controls, and so on and so forth, and also our clients were demanding it. So particularly listed clients, and actually increasingly non-listed clients also, by the nature of their investors or other drivers in their marketplaces, are looking for audited evidence of compliance. So we invested just before in 2019, so just before the turn of the decade, in the international standard, so very much the gold standard, and it was a complete year process of getting the controls in place, documenting them, getting those approved, and then auditing our compliance with them. So it is a big challenge, and as you can see top left there, we've got 160 or more local service providers right around the world. We've got over 100 clients, and that's also important because, of course, every client, Fiona, expects themselves and knows they are the most important, and they're different and have expectations for audit. But our ability to respond to 100 different demands for audit is clearly an unrealistic expectation when there's the day job of getting out 800,000 pay slips a year on a globally coordinated basis.
Ashley, you obviously didn't enter into that process blindly. With so many demands, how did you triage what was the nature of that demand and how you could best meet those requirements?
For compliance with the international standards. So the driving theme was consistency. We've got 4 different global payroll platforms. We wanted to be consistent across them all. So platforms drive in nuances, every client drives in a nuance, but we wanted to be consistent. So we wrote those controls very carefully so that the majority of them applied across all operations, all platforms, all clients. What we then had to do, obviously, is fine tune for some of the platforms, particularly the in-house bespoke platform that we have, where the auditors had very specific expectations on us because we couldn't evidence other people's certification. So we had to evidence our own. So that was our approach, that one size to fit all in terms of generic processes and controls.
And I suppose linked to that, Ashley, there's been an interesting question that has come through from an individual who's a very large payroll services provider,
Okay.
and they have SOC reports, but also they, in some markets, they subcontract where they have no SOC report. How do you? The question is about where should the onus be to ensure that this is in place and how best to push for it. So I can pick up some of that in a second, but for yourselves, of thinking about how you undertook that journey, what was the tipping point of then saying, yes, the demand is such that we will do so, and why? Could you perhaps shed some light on that?
Yeah. So the why, the dominant driver was that if we couldn't evidence that we had been audited and that what we do has been fully audited, then our clients were insisting that they would have to come in and do those audits. And that is clearly a huge burden on me and my team, and also my local service providers around the world. So I wanted to have that burden once. I wanted to get it, as with everything in payroll, I wanted to get it right first time. But I only wanted to do it once and evidence it many times. Then the other thing I did to get consistency was set the control boundary, so the auditing boundary between me and each of the local service teams, be they the 100 or so BDO firms that we engage with, and indeed there are other non-BDO firms where we fill some of the capability with non-BDO teams, to treat them very consistently. So there's a recurring theme, but also to make sure that we demand the same evidence of controls, not only that they're in place, but that the evidence that the controls are effective, and we demand that across our control boundary. So we're effectively assuring end to end, even though not every aspect of every single one of those 100+ operations gets audited.
So I suppose from your point there, and going back to the original question, it takes time to do this.
Yep.
It just doesn't happen overnight. And obviously the volume of demand pushes you to obviously undertake that process then, because you don't want to get audited every day. So to lovely Benjamin's question, I would actually put the point of asking why those sub-providers haven't got it yet. Is it a point that they perhaps are in the process of doing so, and there is a timeline? So put that question out there, and equally form the alternative, because there are a few terms used in this universe which are about carve out or inclusive. Carve out is where you have the benefit of receiving the reports, such as the journey that Ashley has gone through, and you have the benefit of receiving it and getting that transparency and comfort. The alternative is inclusive, whereby you go in and actually audit that yourself and understand, and send in the internal auditors to be able to get that visibility. So putting that, not a threat, but putting that point to the business in itself can be suffice for them to really pull up their socks and get moving. And that can be a core part of the contractual requirement as well. If you do not have that, then we cannot work with you going forward. So various options in that conversation, and you would tend to find that most are receptive to this, because I would really say this is now a license to operate in this space. It should be an expectation of any payroll service provider to have this in place. I'd be worried if they weren't, or hadn't at least embarked upon that journey in some shape or form. So sorry to disrupt your flow, Ashley. I just wanted to
No. The whole idea is it's a discussion, and I know being a Zoom presentation, it's more difficult to interact. But I am grateful to Benjamin for his question. So what did we achieve from doing that investment? Sort of summarising your question to me, it was we defined ways of doing our business. We absolutely clearly documented that. and we, wherever possible, made sure that they were consistent. We really were looking for an enhancement of policies, procedures, and controls, and we achieved that, and the auditor helped us fine tune it. So I think the key message I would have, and of course we all love auditors anyway, don't we, Fiona? But the key message is the auditors were there, particularly in the early days, to help and to guide and to advise. Clearly, when it comes then to the type 2 in evidence, they are there as absolute arbiters of what can be evidence and what can't. But so it was a learning process, and it was really good for us back in the day. And we have seen the benefits, and most importantly of all, our clients have seen the benefits. We are grinding up the first-time pass rates. That, for me, in payroll is the perfect indicator. Clearly, the employee cares that they get paid the right amount on the right day, and the tax is properly calculated. But the getting there is about getting there with the first time, and the absolute minimum number of repeats, certainly not caused by me or my team, because that's a lower burden on everyone, and that's what people are looking for. The fact that the whole process has been a differentiator for me in a market is fortunate. It was part of the investment case, but it's not the dominant driver. And as you said, Fiona, just now, it's becoming a ticket to ride. It's a necessity. So we got there early. We did it before we were told to do it.
I love your positivity, Ashley, of the clear benefits. You have a smile on your face, because many, when they are first faced with the need to do this as a business, it's often described as going through the different stages of grief, of denial, of frustration, of anxiety, of a whole raft of areas of emotions, to actually get through that process, but to come out the other end in terms of a new horizon and reflection in terms of what's gone through. So it ultimately, this is it's good to see that you can talk well about those benefits.
Excellent. And the final proof of the pudding and the benefit was the resilience we were able to document during the COVID-19 pandemic. There are regional conflicts in Europe and elsewhere in the world which have driven payrolls to be moved, some of them at very, very short notice. But the fact that we can be resilient in the countries where we're still operating that are involved in those conflicts, i.e. There are some where we obviously had to exit, such as Russia and Belarus, but where we have remained, we've invested really hard to make sure that we were resilient through that process. And of course, there's the ever-present natural disasters, fires, floods, volcanoes, earthquakes, and so on, which try to take us all off course each year. So what are we seeing in the market? So this is my final slide, and it's from a service provider's perspective, as in payroll service provider. We are seeing consolidation. So where people have done M&A over the years, there's not a lot of M&A happening just at the moment, and a lot of companies are taking the opportunity to consolidate, whether that's a platform transformation and platform consolidation, or whether it's their own processes, or indeed their supply chain. Your clients where we've got a small number of payrolls coming for larger, others are going back through the RFP process, which is a good due diligence in itself. So that's one of the trends. The other trend is spin-offs and carve-outs, and we've handled these over the last 4, 5, 6 years, but actually they've started becoming more frequent. And the big challenge with the carve-out and the spin-offs is normally timescale, and the ability to resource it with a very finite number of HR, payroll, and the all-important IT specialists that are required to do that split, because often it's you're setting up 2 organizations from what was one mothership organization. The other, it's more than just payroll, it's the HR platforms, and the can be a very tricky area with payroll is treasury. And we know that probably takes the longest lead time of planning, because you've got to get bank accounts or whatever else done. And in each country, the treasury expectations are different. So it's perhaps for some it would be an unexpected challenge, but it is a recurrent challenge. That treasury is a challenge in spin-offs and carve-outs. The other trend, the other two trends, one is clients that are maturing beyond the PEO, and you challenged me, Fiona,
Yes. What is
in
PEO actually?
our a little rehearsal that we did quick run through yesterday, and it's a professional employees operation or organisation. So a business that can employ your professionals rather than you having to employ them for whatever reason that may be. Maybe you haven't got an entity in the country. Maybe you just don't want to have employees. But what we do see is that as the mother business grows and they start doing things like share options and other sophisticated remuneration for their employees, those who are employed by the PEO either get left out, which isn't very motivating for them, or they end up with a risk of double tax implications of the company having a tax obligation, the individual having two tax obligations, and the PEO having theirs as well. So it's a tricky area, and it's often a trigger for clients to decide to move away from PEO and go to establishing themselves as fully fledged employers. And then the other cluster, which is really the segue to you, Fiona, is that we are seeing a bigger and bigger expectation in data protection and all the evidence that must go with it, ESG compliance, and also an expectation of supplier audits, something you talked about there. And I mentioned earlier the challenges that provides me if I've got 100 clients expecting to do supplier audits on me. That's clearly a very, very high expectation, and to be frank, just not achievable. So finding ways around that to be able to evidence once to many is what I'm really interested in. So so I don't know whether you've got any challenges on that slide, Fiona, or you want to progress to your own.
I think I will link them in with my own, Ashley, and I can continue that, I think, through the next stages. But I definitely do want to build upon the trend aspect, because many of you will be familiar with the journey that Ashley has talked about to date in terms of what we as a firm has gone through, what our payroll services have gone through in terms of getting to their own assurance and building that out. But this is not a static landscape, I suppose. And I suppose an open question to you, Ashley, before I go through what that's looking like, is how are you responding to these trends at the minute? How are you incorporating what the wider demand is?
So the early indicator of these trends is normally in RFPs. So when we get a request for proposals, you see, for instance, data protection used to be a question or two. Are you compliant with law? Have you got this? I have had in one RFP 1,000 questions, literally 1,000 questions across in a multi-tab Excel spreadsheet, of which the very, very significant proportion was data protection. So the detail, the precision, and so on, that expectation is rising. So that's one. And so we've got to be very, very fast, because timescales are tight in RFPs, in providing that evidence. We've got the evidence, but it isn't always the easiest thing to pull out and to make sure it's completely fresh to submit. And the other is in the supplier policies. Anti-modern slavery legislation has been around for a while. It used to be a tick box, but now there's more evidence required all the way end to end in the supply chain. So that's the indicator for me that things are changing and that clients are mandating that they a higher expectation.
Perfect.
Excellent.
I will take that point to move to the next one then, Ashley.
Yep, there we go.
Lovely. So where I want to pick up, folks, is what many of you may already know and love and the expectation on assurance to date. I'm not going to dwell upon this, but as Ashley said, we will share the slides so you have all the words within that thereafter. But then look to what that evolving landscape is. If you're not aware of it yet, what perhaps the tsunami of demands will be upon you and how best you can actually respond to that. So we've a couple of more acronyms here, folks, just at the top. Talk about our classic SOC, or our 3402. You okay, Ashley?
Yeah, can you, my screen has changed. Is it changed on you?
No, we're fine. We're okay.
You're okay, good.
We're still good. We're still good. We'll let you know when we move to the next one. Hopefully it will be okay. Might have a static moment.
Yep. Sorry, I just had a Clicker on my screen.
Okay.
Apologies.
Okay. Always a little technical glitch. So I would just emphasize first the classic SOC. When we talk about SOC, Service Organization Control Reporting, or ISAE, International Standard of Assurance Engagements 3402. And that is very specific to when your control environment is linked to the financial controls in some shape or form. So as payroll providers, etc., obviously an integral aspect of this. So what this does is just bring to life those classic steps that are undertaken and how one would support you or how I support my clients along that journey. And it really plays to all those points that Ashley has woven into his presentation throughout in terms of how one drives consistency really through that readiness aspect, how one's understanding what you have, what you need to do, how you're looking at that risk agenda and how best you respond to that, but really being able to build up and understand what you have and what you need to do to be able to move to the next steps. So a very key part of that. There is, for anyone starting out, there is a period of remediation because you're not going to have everything beautiful to begin with. We've seen that in Ashley's journey insofar as his timeline of how they have worked through. They have worked through the challenges to be able to get to the right point to progress to assurance. Because ultimately they're striving for excellence, but they're striving for providing that visibility to the myriad of clients that they have internationally, that we have internationally. And 2 key points then to pick up here. These assurance frameworks are built to help you get there. So I'll refer back to Benjamin's lovely question so far as why clients don't have it. There's a construct there to help them get there quickly, because your touch point, your beginning point is your type 1 of what have you got? Is it in place at a point in time? So that's your type 1 report, that you have designed controls and they're in place at a point in time. But then the evolution to a type 2, where they're not only in place, but they've operated effectively throughout a period of time. So these take time, took us over a year. Sometimes for clients, they can do so much more quickly. I've been able to turn that around. I've done some for some clients within 3 months, but it really depends on the maturity of the environment, how much time you have to invest in that and to make that happen. So this construct is very classically under the control environment that Ashley talked about, that visibility of financial controls. But to play back on the trends that you noted, Ashley, when you said about data, when you said about ESG, etc., I'm just going to shine a little bit of a light on that, of how that is disrupting. This has been a classic output that many will know and love, and what that evolving demand is, and almost that new license to operate. If you could just move to the next one, Ashley, see if your screen works. There we go, lovely. Okay, so there is an evolution in play. I'm going to scene set here, guys, and then drill a little bit more within it. But you will know yourselves as HR payroll practitioners that even in your current construct of reports, perhaps, where you can talk a lovely rhetoric about what you have in place, from your wider operational dimensions. And that's very much what one used to refer to even as the corporate and social responsibility agenda. We got away with a lot of rhetoric at that point in time. Things are moving a lot. And now we're actually moving into the world of a lot more quantitative and qualitative assessments on what businesses like yourselves are saying, are doing. And this is where our ESG, our sustainability agenda, really comes into play. As what is happening is that there are many more stakeholders out there who are driving the demand from you in terms of visibility of the practices undertaken. So key ones you will note at the top here of our slides. I'm just going to canter through them and then give you a few examples on them. Are really that finance community, investors, the businesses that you have, perhaps loan finance-backed facilities in terms of the nature of the business. There is a good risk management discipline in terms of the profile of you as a business, how you manage the risk associated with the profile of you as a business. There is a mounting realm of regulation, which I will shine a light on in a second. And then you have your customers, vendors, employers, all of whom coming in with a multitude of demands for visibility. And the commonality across all of these different stakeholders is, if you just look to the bottom, they are ultimately looking for transparency. I would dare I say the word confidence as well of what is happening. They want something which is measurable. So this is down to the specificity level We've had this on the control side, and as you mentioned, Ashley, building out that construct of the consistency across international locations, etc. But they're looking for something which is reportable as well, that you can share, which is visible, that's something tangible to see, not just what you say, but what you're actually demonstrating, and which actually is holistic as well. This is not just looking at one thing, but the construct of a business. This is where ESG as a whole comes into play, all of those differing dynamics. Today, I'm not going into a myriad of different frameworks that sit under this. These are many guiding principles. There's too many acronyms in there to begin with today. Ones which you may be familiar with based on your specific industry that you're striving to fulfill as an organization. And these can be very much guiding principles to help you with the construct of what I will just pick up on the next point.
Okay, so Fiona, if I could just ask you, so looking at your investors and stakeholders, and combined with that, the regulators for publicly listed, the rules are set down. That's particularly on the US side. That's what's driven the ISA 3402 to match up to the American equivalent standard. But are you seeing that spread out now beyond the publicly listed into alternatively financed businesses?
Absolutely. I'd say my clients are from entrepreneurial clients because they see what they need to report, disclose, and assure as being fundamental as a launch point of what they're doing. So that expectation is coming from investment community, from existing and potential customers. So you have that and those demand aspects. And they're actually the wonderful ones because they're doing it for that reason and they want it to be very much entrenched in what they do and how they evolve. When you get more at the more mature end of the space, you can just get the perhaps the approach of we have to do this because it's in regulation, but is it really ingrained in the business as a whole? So you have these differing dynamics that you need to look at in tandem, but our demand is, and the market demand is driven not just by regulation, it is indeed across that swathe of different areas. And maybe Ashley, if you go to the next one, I can shine a bit of a light upon some of those differing dynamics, and then perhaps if you have any questions specifically on those, because this just helps a little bit. And apologies for the busyness on this, but it's to give you a bit of a flavor, folks. So I want to pick those stakeholders because, to your point, Ashley, there's regulation that goes with the construct of being a listed client and many more demands on that. And some of you may have heard of imminent UK SOX, for example, and BES, which will place even more demands, not just on the financial environment, but that wider operational and ESG environment. So if you haven't thought about that yet, I would encourage you to do so and reach out if you want any other advice or support on that. And in regulation, we are increasingly seeing an embedded requirement for independent assurance. This is not just you should disclose, but also you should assure. So I've given a little bit of a snapshot down below of some of the regulation that has evolved, over the last 25 odd years. But there's a real concertina in the current era, and it's really hotting up. And those which are even slotted in to come into place over the coming years. So this is not going away, and there will be increasing demands upon the wider reporting which is to ensue. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight the reg side first, as you've mentioned it, Ashley.
Yeah.
But I'm going to look to some of this wider side because some of our HR people maybe even be thinking, oh, is this relevant to me? We've mostly been talking payroll here and overall service provision. But from an interesting angle we're seeing on the investor community side, for example, is a demand from businesses to disclose how they're performing against wider metrics, which aren't just your classic environmental, which are generally your greenhouse gas emissions, which have been requested across the board, but going more into that social construct, looking at gender, looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, the whole range of areas within that. And actually one that you and I talked about, Ashley, yesterday was a particular client we're working with at the minute where their whole financing agreement is based upon the gender-specific metrics and their employee development metrics, where they're required to disclose and have independent assurance on those on an annual basis. So folks, for those sitting in HR, indeed, what those disciplines are of how you collate, manage, etc., to be able to disclose on this is something to keep in mind. And I'll shine a bit of a light on that in a second in terms of the how. Another angle, you mentioned about the extent of M&A, Ashley, earlier as well. In the M&A community, listing, even in that space, there is a big demand in terms of disclosure on the ESG performance, not just on financial performance, where that was previously the main slant, but now what is the overall approach, structure, readiness in terms of any regulations coming, but how this is embedded into the fabric of a business. So we're increasingly being asked to do work on that and provide assurance. So beware out there for those that are embarking upon any of this. Just thinking about risk management for any business, reputation now is absolutely fundamental. It's a deal breaker, and any of the ESG dimensions, any one of those individually could be a deal breaker for a business in terms of its brand. So being aware of that and how that is managed to make sure that you're all over that internally, as well as what you may gain in terms of assurance on your business or seek in terms of that confidence. And then I'm going to move to the final area of that, which is what you talked about, Ashley, of the supplier audits. And this is very hot area and a massive driver in terms of why you need to be all over this, folks. Because as looking at key suppliers, looking at you as a provider or those providers you work with, suppliers will fall under what is known as scope 3 potential emissions. And sorry for the rhetoric on this, folks, for those who aren't aware of it, but there is a big demand in terms of reporting, which currently falls into mandatory reporting requirements for main listed large privates, a lot of the international regimes in terms of greenhouse gas reporting. And where that has evolved over the years, in the early 10s, 2013, to cover just scope 1 and 2, which fell within your own business. Scope 3 is now coming into regulation in terms of disclosure, and scope 3 hits purchased goods and services, so key suppliers. So where Ashley is saying that he will be audited, he'll be hit by a supplier audit, you don't want people to be auditing you in terms of what your carbon disclosures are, what that footprint looks like, etc. So there's a need for you to be all over your understanding of what your different carbon emissions are, how you can disclose, how you can report, how you can assure, to avoid that pressure of being inundated with, be it a 40-page questionnaire or a auditor coming on your doorstep. Try and avoid that and be ready in terms of what you're going to report, how you're going to report it, etc. within that.
Yeah, and Fiona, I would hazard a guess that actually clients really don't want to be sending their auditors to their supply chain. They'd much prefer to be able to take a third-party assurance.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
it's going to be at their cost, and they've got to drive it, they've got to engage with the auditor and so on. So
exactly.
I think it's a virtuous circle.
Totally. And as businesses, working with any third parties, there's a reputational risk within this. So this is a very important part of how everyone manages their supply chain risk, of making sure that any business that they associate with has got the appropriate credentials, footprint, disclosures, and having good reporting on this, and indeed the confidence through assurance helps with that brand reputation and avoidance of issues down the line. So it'll really help you in the market commercially in terms of what that messaging is, what you put out there, to make sure that you just help with that reputational protection across the board. Okay.
Brilliant.
So just moving to the next one. So this is an interesting bit. You may be thinking, wow, okay, you're talking to me about all these evolving demands. I'm familiar with my classic SOC reporting, SOC 1s and 3402s, which are very controls driven. Well, unfortunately, this new world of evolving disclosures is a lot more data driven. So actually, to your point on increased requirements around even data protection and how we protect and manage our data, the emphasis is very much on what data we have, how you manage it, and how you report this in the right way. So if I can just take a second to think about the simple construct of what one needs when one has to assure something. You have a subject matter. In your case, Ashley, it's your payroll service provision to begin with. Okay. Then you have to have something to assess that against. In your classic 342 or SOC reports, you're looking at that against completeness, accuracy, validity, etc., across your objectives in place. And then, therefore, that has driven the particular assurance framework. When we look into this evolving subject matter, here where we're talking about wider metrics, disclosures such as greenhouse gas or gender or development, whatever they may be, it's a different subject matter. And how we assess that is against what is that methodology that you have in place. So for any of you sitting out there in HR in your business, you need to have clearly set out how you construct those different metrics, be it how you gather gender data within the firm, on what systems, through self-disclosures, identification, taken as a very simple one, or indeed that more complex greenhouse gas one, how you get the visibility on your goods and services from scope 3 providers, how you gather that internally from your various sources. So it's a very big exercise in terms of that understanding and data gathering. And then we mention a few other acronyms. Here are the construct of an ISA 3000 or 3410. So sorry about that, folks. But all this is a different wrapper to allow us to address that different subject matter. And myself, the likes of me as an assurance practitioner, this is where our skill set comes into play. What type of assurances you need, in which situation, and how do you undertake that? So unfortunately, it's a little bit of an alien world here from just knowing, here's my controls, bang, I test them, I have the ongoing confidence in the operating effectiveness. So we're looking at it through a different slant here. And when we look at this, there are quite a few considerations whenever we're preparing this, thinking about it, the angles, etc., many of which link back to the journeys we've talked about before. There's those boundaries of your business, the scoping, Ashley, as you talked about at the beginning, how you set that out. Then we're thinking specifically about data architecture. Where is your data coming from? From what sources? Are you working with other third parties? Is it your own data? How does that come together? What does that flow and into whom? What are you then using that for and calculating? Because there are quite a lot of estimations or actuals that may come into play within this. And then where do responsibilities lie? They're done at the group level, they're done at the entity level. How does that all come together? And then a very critical point on this is the supporting IT infrastructure. If you've had lots of mergers or acquisitions, there might be quite a complex IT landscape there, which should be familiar with, Ashley. We've talked about it before.
Definitely.
And unfortunately, for non-financial data, it tends to be a bit more of the Wild West. It may not be those lovely mature ERPs that you have in place, but quite often we see at the minute, many just have spreadsheets or many different weird and wonderful ways of constructing that data, analysing and reporting it. So it is very much an evolving area. And with that, many are immature in terms of the construct that they have to gather this together and to enable them to report easily, effectively, with confidence. So it's quite a challenging area for many. And I imagine there's many on the call today who are thinking, I haven't started that yet, or thought about that. And there may be others who say, we're all over that because we have a department who do that and they ask us for data and we do these wonderful things. So I'm interested if anyone has any queries specifically on that and would like to bring that to life. But I'm just going to move on just to, I'm conscious of time and we want to leave a few minutes for any other questions. But just looking on to the next one, Ashley. So we've talked about journey in the traditional sense. We've talked about the evolving areas. And I just wanted to shine a little bit of a light here that this new space is evolving. It's not, here's a new thing and it's static. And it is a journey. So for many of you or who you're asking it of, it will be a stepping stone once again, which will follow a similar construct that we talked about before. So I just wanted to shine a little bit of a light here about how you understand what's needed, how you kick the tires in terms of what are the disciplines behind that to allow that to come together. And then there's an evolution aspect. Many will start off first with the big demand of regulation, generally, which is scope 1 and 2 GHG emissions, and then evolve year on year as you build that foundation, that confidence, that construct, and disclose more. And as the regulatory agenda and indeed demands of stakeholders evolve and ask more and more, that will only but grow year on year. And how that plays into assurances, the nature of what that output is looking like is a slightly different opinion. For the data world and ESG at the minute, it is very much about limited assurance because there's too many unknowns, too many estimations, data not yet mature enough. And with that, what that means is it's very much that nothing has come to our attention in that assurance that has not been prepared on material aspects in line with its methodology. So it's framed in the negative. That is the norm at the minute. There are very few outliers to that, but the direction of travel is that that non-financial control environment will evolve in terms of maturity to be on a par with that financial control environment, that nirvana that Ashley has in place, of the disciplines, the systems, the consistency of application across the business of what is in place so that eventually reasonable assurance can be applied. And this is what we're starting to see people ask for, of helping them get there. This is going to be an expectation in the likes of UK SOX and BES and what is coming there. And indeed in regulations, there's already lots of discussion on setting out that expectation, even if it should it be limited, should it be reasonable assurance, which is built into the requirements. So
Fiona, the acronym alarm has just gone off. You talked about BES.
Yeah.
Can you just explain that one?
Yes, indeed. And that's sorry for those internationally, but that is indeed our UK Department of Business. I'm going to get caught out now saying the incorrect one. Economic and Infrastructure Services, who have restructured recently to be renamed to another 3-letter acronym. So apologies to that. But the main point to remember is the words that people will be familiar with. Perhaps our UK SOX is coming. For those in the US, the SEC is tightening their belt as well in terms of what their expectations are. So that whole landscape is evolving. And indeed our European counterparts, they're also getting hit with the likes of CSRD, which is in terms of their carbon disclosures as well, which are coming into force. So we could do sessions in itself of explaining all the different acronyms, the different jurisdictions and landscapes. But the main point I wanted people to take away is that the regulatory landscape globally is responding to this. There are international bodies behind it which are pushing this, such as the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board. So assurance demands will be coming. And for you as payroll, HR, different firms, the expectations on you will be significant and what you will be demanding from other suppliers as well. So get yourself up to speed and start getting yourself on that journey to make sure that you're ready and can be primed, because it will not happen overnight.
Great. Fiona, thank you for that. We had the question earlier from Ben, which proves that our question and answer system is working. I haven't seen any other questions come in, but we are here. We didn't intend to take the whole hour because I know people will be grateful for a few minutes before their next commitment if they've got one. But I'm hugely grateful for that. It's I think it's got to be a bit of a worrying and challenging time for both on the client side, on the corporate side, and on the supply chain. And I think as much communication as can take place in advance, so that we're ready for what people wish to impose on us, and indeed they're ready for what you as an auditor might need to impose on them.
And actually, may I say, I don't constitute us as auditors on this. It is very important for any business to find a partner who will support them on the process, because it is much as getting that construct together, understanding what's coming, how you're going to be best prepared for this. So having a dedicated partner who can support on that and then help you get over the line with assurance. So I see us more in that support capacity. Yes, we do wear an auditing hat on it at a point in time, but it's very important to get that right partner.
Yeah, and that's why your side of the business is so different from the statutory audit, where
Exactly.
they're not allowed to be the client's friend. It's absolutely, they're not
Yes.
even calling them clients now. Um, but yes,
We don't implement.
that's a really good point, and it goes back all the way to the help, the assistance, the guidance that we benefited from 4 or 5 years ago when we started this journey.
Exactly.
So exciting times ahead,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and
And a
in the
real opportunity for everybody, I should say. So
yeah,
grasp it. It's a real differentiator in terms of the messages and what you can do within this. So do not see this as a plethora of demands coming upon you, but as a real opportunity to get your head above the parapet and set out what you believe, what's fundamental to you, and some of the great things that you have in place.
excellent. I think that's a great point on which to finish. Fiona,
Lovely.
thank you for joining me on this webinar of our global series. We'll have one, I trust, in the autumn, if not before. And I think actually within a year or so, we could return here and see what's come to fruition and what hasn't. It's been an enjoyable hour for me to listen and to learn. Every day is a school day. And I trust that our audience has enjoyed it as well. And certainly, I'm delighted to see that the numbers have remained good, which is a good sign of
Cool.
commitment there.
And any questions, do reach out to us. We'll be
Yeah,
happy to pick
yeah,
up and support.
yeah, that's a really good point. You've all now got a point of contact in BDO in terms of where this invite reached you from. Please do go through that to ask to speak to me or to Fiona or any of our other colleagues. We'd be delighted.
Lovely.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll end the webinar there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.